Welcome to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we are on a journey to answer 4 leadership questions from some of the best leaders and leadership minds in the country. So today we are pleased to have special guest, Chad Zoretic. And Chad, welcome and thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Glad to be here.
All right. Glad. Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to this. So first off, if you don't mind introducing yourself to the listeners, who you are, what you do, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Chad Zoretic. I'm a partner with Armanino. It's a top 20 consulting, tax, and audit firm in the U.S. My focus is on merger and acquisition consulting primarily from a financial due diligence standpoint, but I do work also with a lot of founders on enterprise planning, exit planning, as well as a lot of private equity investors on acquiring companies as well. So kind of a mix on, as we say, both buy side and sell side.
Nice. Well, what kind of got you into that?
Boredom in audit. So I started my career in audit, and I'm not knocking audit. I'm actually very grateful for it. But I really got exposed to early in my career when I left audit to join a public company that was highly acquisitive. And the idea of learning about a business very quickly and just soaking it up like a sponge really appealed to me. And the rest, or the vast majority of my 31 plus year career has been revolved around AI. And so I have, whether it's been from a consulting perspective or from an owner operator perspective, been involved with some sort of mergers or acquisitions throughout my career.
Gotcha. I guess for those that aren't as familiar with the whole merger and acquisition field, explain that just a little bit. What kind of goes into it from maybe the buyer side, the seller side, you guys trying to herd cats in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, simply put, to use kind of maybe a more common metaphor that most people or a lot of people could relate to, if you're putting your house on the market for sale, there's a process. You hire a broker usually to assist with it. Sometimes you do your own inspection of your house before putting it on market to just see if there's anything that needs to be fixed.
Right.
You have a pretty good idea, if you do your homework, of what you could expect for your house from a selling price perspective. And then you actually have to get it sold. And that involves, well, meeting potential buyers. And that involves fielding questions from them, from their home inspector. That also involves maybe some legal with getting the contract signed too. And so that's what I'm involved with just on the business side. When you are selling your business or when you're buying a business, you go through a lot of the same processes. It's probably a little bit more complex, and it does require, sometimes it feels like it requires an army, but it's the same basic concept. And so if you're exiting or selling your company, you got to do some homework, or it's best to do some homework for preparation. And certainly if you're acquiring a company, you want to know a lot about it to substantiate your valuation thesis, B, figure out how it's all going to work on day one when you get the keys to your new house. So that's in a nutshell what I'm exposed to, at least.
Cool. Well, one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about as we go through is I buy a business, I sell a business, seems fairly straightforward. I do have to laugh. There was a recent newspaper article in our local news about one bank, quote, merging with another. But you could tell the lawyers really worked that press statement over really hard because not being in the industry, right? I figured if they merge, but the smaller bank changes all its logos to the big bank, all its stationery changes to the big bank, all its employees are now employees of the big bank. That sounded way more like an acquisition than a merger. And they were like, well, it is. We just wanted to try to make them feel good and, get a, just kind of make them, it was funny. It was just all from the lawyers. And I laugh because I'm interested to find out from you, just from I bought your business and you're going to be kind of part of our ecosystem now versus a true merger where you've got two pretty much equal companies coming together. And then now they're going to have to, instead of absorbing their team, and okay, some stay, some go, we've already got people in place for that, versus really merging two leadership teams together to try to form now one true company versus just I gobbled up a small one.
Yeah, I would say just from experience, I mean, merger and acquisition, sometimes they become synonymous with one another. Usually, there's never a true merger of equals. I mean, usually there's
Really?
call it a dominant personality or a dominant gene that
Got
kind of drives it. However, I think that all acquisitions are mergers on some level from a culture standpoint. So even if you have like if you're a big platform company that is buying a smaller company as an add-on acquisition,
right.
that add-on acquisition has a culture. It has people. And while the smaller organization may have new business cards or new signage and adopt the name of the larger parents, um, you still have to merge cultures. And so while I'm a numbers guy and I love my numbers, right? And I'm a quant jock and all that stuff, the more I see mergers and acquisitions, I really do pay attention, very much so, to the people side of it. At the end of the day, it's got to work, and that means the ones that tend to work well are the ones that have an alignment in values and vision, etc. So in my mind, there's always a merger of sorts. It's a qualitative merger, perhaps, on some level.
Nice. Yeah, I could see where obviously if a company became successful because they had a specific culture, and like I said, they got acquired by a much larger firm. If they come in heavy-handed and said, "Hey, this is the way we do things," well, and that's polar opposite to what made that smaller company successful and worth acquiring in the first place. Yeah, I could see that not aging well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have seen that happen. I mean, I have where effectively the acquisition, they were truly just really interested in acquiring either the technology to apply elsewhere or the
Mm,
customer list. So it was, and look, if I'm advising a client on selling their business and they really, and most people do, care about where their people are landing, as
right.
well as especially if they are staying involved in the business, those are all reverse diligence questions that you've got to be asking the people and or the organization buying you out. How does it work, and what is your personality like, and what is the plan? And so there's a lot of stuff that not only prepping your own business so you have a kind of a proper expectation level on valuation, and raising the confidence level to actually close the deal.
Right.
There's actually another layer of diligence, which I call reverse diligence. Who
Hmm.
is it that is investing you or buying you or taking over, and how do they run things? And so there's some good some quantitative discussions, but a lot of philosophical discussions too.
No doubt in my mind. I was going to say, hopefully throughout the questions, we can dig into a little bit of that a little bit further. But with that, let's start with the first question. So, what does leadership mean to you, and what does good leadership look like?
So leadership to me is being a leader means, I think, creating an environment that has trust inherently built in it, and creating a culture that promotes and fosters effective communication of all things, good and bad. So it is someone who will push that and almost like require that in their own culture. And what I mean by that is, and there it's a I'm borrowing this from an old business case video, but that concept of you can't manage a secret, right? So we don't want people keeping secrets. We want to know about issues, get it out in the open. Number two, a leader, I think a good leader is someone that is vulnerable, someone that is willing to absolutely take 100% accountability for his or her team. A good leader praises, gives credit where credit is due. Actually, a good leader really takes very little of the credit, if at all. It's his team's credit or her team's credit. A good leader provides good, timely feedback, good and bad, so that we all can grow. And I think a good leader has a lot of self-awareness that and knows their limitations, knows their strengths, knows their weaknesses, and in promoting a culture of honesty is most importantly honest with themselves.
Nice. A couple things that stood out to me when you were first talking about is the trust and communication. I can't put a high enough price on organizational trust and communication, because you're right. Technically you could do all the communication you want, and if they don't trust you, I've seen places before where it's like, yeah, I hear the words coming out of your mouth, but it's all corporate speak and flavor of the month stuff, and it just unfortunately kind of goes in one ear and out the other because of they've shot trust in the foot so many times. It's like, yeah, I show up, but I'm really not paying attention to what you're saying.
And you can't just say it, you have to do it. You have to show it. You have to lead by example, and you can't have expectations of someone else on your team to do it if you're not willing to do it yourself or haven't done it yourself at some point in your career. But absolutely, talk is cheap, right? You got to walk the walk, or whatever the metaphor is. So, completely agree with that.
I laugh. I said, you could look at it the other way. Well, for what they're paying some of these executives just to talk and not do, talk sometimes isn't as cheap as it should be.
Very true. Very true.
Just throwing that out there.
You got me on that one, Dave. You got me.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Talk is cheap, and you need to put your foot to the ground to get stuff done. But unfortunately, I've seen a lot of pretty high-paid executives do a whole lot of this and not a whole lot of, getting like I said, getting rubber to the road to get things accomplished.
Yeah, but you know what though? There's a tail on that. Yeah, I mean that does, like, that will become your reputation.
Yeah.
And not all of us are going to be Fortune 50 executives, and I'm not saying that Fortune 50 executives are like that per se, but at some point, like, your reputation does catch up with you. And that's actually one of the things too that, in my role, while I'm very market facing and I do a lot of business development, I still execute on deals. I say that it keeps the edges of my skis sharp.
Nice.
It keeps me honest. It is a constant reminder of how hard it is to execute, and the hiccups that you get, and the bumps in the road, all that. So I think it makes it a little bit more relatable, and I think it's pretty important to that leaders roll up their sleeves and are very engaged with their team.
No, I like that. You mentioned two things: either still out there doing it, or had done it so many times before they built up that reputation that, like, this guy's the karate master, right? He doesn't have to go out. This guy has built the reputation, right? That he's done this so many times. He's, like I said, famous for it. And you would hope knock on wood, you would hope that the good ones that communicate well, build the trust, are transparent, the ones that are really doing it right. Hopefully, you would think that hope and pray the cream would rise to the top, and they're more the Fortune 50, execs versus some of the folks that don't quite get up to that point. But you're right. I think your reputation, it will follow you at some point. I know it's not 100%, but I'm a firm believer at some point your BS will catch up with you.
Yep.
if you're truly blowing smoke, and really good at managing up and not really great at managing your people, that at some point, that there will be a cap or ceiling. But who knows? Like I said, every organization is a little bit different. But
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, too, you not everything's going to go perfect.
no.
And so I think that's also where leaders can shine by being accountable and acknowledging, like, hey, things haven't gone exactly the way that any of us would like, but what do we do? Like, we will fix it. And guess what? It's on me. It is on me. And we will find a way to, fix it and move forward. And if you can't fix it and move forward, then you're exposed, right? Then people know that it is all talk on some level.
Yeah, there are two pairings of words that I really like, and then we'll close out this segment. But the first one's where you talk about trust and communication, and then the other one you talk about transparency and accountability. Like I said, if you are really transparent and you're accountable, hey, it's on me, and you can get it turned around, great. If not, like I said, then it's all smoke and mirrors, and you realize, okay, well, maybe this person, his mouth is, or her mouth is writing checks that their hind parts and their skill level just can't cash.
Yeah, I mean, and all like those four words, I think there are four between trust, accountability, transparency, and they're all great buzzwords, right? They are all great buzzwords, but unless you back it up, it does the complete opposite of what those words are meant to convey and stand for.
Absolutely. So that sounds like a great place to end this segment. So we'll be back in just a few minutes with Chad on Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. So we will see you in a moment. Welcome back to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, where we are here with Chad Zoretic. And Chad, let's jump straight into our second question. So what is one of the biggest leadership challenges you've had to face?
Ooh, this is a pretty big question because there's a lot of challenges. I'll take it kind of from an evolution perspective. One of the first biggest challenges I had was actually evolving and recognizing that I was a leader. And what I mean by that is I do come from the, I guess, Mr. Miyagi Karate Kid school, and have done a lot of waxing on and off and painting fences and whatever it is, and have become quite skilled at the art of financial due diligence and analyzing companies.
Right.
And I was really good at it. I am really good at it. But you spend a lot of your career doing most of the execution yourself. When you are evolving into a leadership role, though, you have to learn how to delegate. You have to learn how to teach. You have to learn that things aren't going to move at the same speed sometimes. Sometimes it's actually slower because you have to let the learning curve take place. And unless you can delegate and train other folks, you're not going to be much of a leader, at least from a team leader perspective, because it is about being a leader of a group, at least the way I define it. And that was a tough process. It's tough to let go. I think, and I work with a lot of entrepreneurs too, a lot of startup founders and business founders. I think that's probably one of the hardest things is letting go. Mm. But you have to, otherwise you're going to max out. You're going to hit a wall. In the simplest terms, if I had my own business and I usually charge, rate card times hour. And
Right.
in a given year, you have 2,000 hours expected of work time. Well, you're going to make 2,000 hours times whatever your rate is, and probably do pretty well. But if you want to grow beyond that, monetarily speaking, you're going to have to build a leverage model, or implement some technology that allows you to scale rapidly. And it's usually a combination of technology and additional team members. So at some point you have to learn to let go if you want to grow. And also for me personally, it wasn't all about the money. I want to grow professionally too. So I got kind of tired of just painting fences, right? And waxing cars and stuff like that. Um, so it without having a team that learns the trade, you can't really move on to other things. You can't really explore other things because the job has to get done. That's the most important thing in client
Right.
service. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge. I think, at least for me, it was letting go, and realizing that I have limitations on what I can do, and I'm certainly not skilled at everything. I mean,
Right.
and I think that's probably second challenge is acknowledging that you're not good at certain things. And the quicker that you can do that, and the quicker you put your ego aside and accept help and actually ask for help, the better leader you're going to be. You build a team around you to offset your weaknesses and complement your strengths as well too. And it so it's really part of the evolution is team building, and with the right team and the right ingredients. And so that was another thing, that the more self-aware I became,
Mm-hmm.
the better. And that was how I viewed myself, how I critically reviewed myself. The third challenge was going from a kind of a sole practitioner, say, to a
Right.
leader is, how does your team view you? How are you viewed as a leader? What is the feedback that you get? What is your perception? Because at the end of the day, perception is the reality. It is. And you may disagree with it, but if people are perceive your behavior a certain way, that is their truth. It may
Yeah.
not line up with your truth. So you need to have alignment on that so that you can grow and change and adopt new ways of communication. And that's where it all kind of circles back to trust, communication, transparency, so that we're all growing together. And just because you're at the partner level doesn't mean you stop growing. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean it. And also I find that I grow even more by trying to teach,
Yeah.
and trying to foster growth. I grow way more than that. Just like I tend to grow, and most people do, I think, tend to grow way more through rebounding from a mistake or a
Mm.
failure versus just doing victory laps for job well done. So there's a lot more growth, I feel like, that comes out of the hard knocks, so to speak.
Nice. Well, you had a bunch of nuggets that flew out of that one. A couple things I wanted to, you talked about the being self-aware, knowing what you're good at and what you're not. And I think that you mentioned about putting together a team. Well, if you know what you're not good at or what you don't like to do, or what just really is something that you're like, I would do anything not to have to, eat the fried liver, right? Just anything. Just don't put me doing that. Hiring somebody that they love to do that, being able to delegate that to them. I mean, it's joy for both of you at some point. But if you can't, you're right, and you don't know that, whether it's the startup person, the leader, whoever, you mentioned about, delegating being so important, you end up realizing that, hey, you're the bottleneck if you can't do that. At some
That's
point,
right.
there's only 24 hours in a day. There's, like you said, there's only, so many billable hours in a year. At some level, you become the bottleneck. And if you don't get out of your own way, you're never going to be able to grow, whether that's inside an organization, outside an organization. And one of the things I picked up on, which I thought was really good about training your people and having, them know what you do, and exactly, getting them trained and developed, personally and professionally. But if thinking about it from an internal corporate standpoint, if you're a director or executive director and you're looking to move up to that, associate VP or VP role, you know, you you say, hey, I'm not training my people to do my job because they're going to take my job. Well, unfortunately, you said it really well. The job has to get done, and at some level, you might be the best person for that VP spot. But if you don't have anybody trained behind you to be able to just hit the ground running seamlessly in your position, you might get passed over for that promotion because we can't have, that executive director position or that director position be left vacant for a length of time, or we don't have time to ramp somebody up in 9 months. We need somebody to hit the ground running, so we can do that. Or we'll promote this other person, this other department head, to that VP job instead of you, because we don't have a successor for you. And so that it's kind of like that. I don't want to delegate. I don't want to train someone how to do my job. Just really bit you in the hind parts bad, because now you stunted your own professional development because of not wanting to let go.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, early in my career, and I don't know where I heard it. I doubt I came up with it myself, but I adopted it early on, and has served me well. I've always tried to replace myself. That was a goal. And I mean that seriously. Like, I tried to replace what I did either by automating it with technology or simplifying the task and or training other people to do that task, because it 9 times out of 10 led me to a different opportunity. And
Mm.
so I've never been afraid. I've never had fear of replacing myself. And it has bit me in the butt once or twice, but I mean, it's okay. That probably just meant that I wasn't in the right culture anyway. So it's okay. So don't be afraid of like replacing yourself. And I think actually also, even from like a selling a business perspective, if you're a founder selling your business and you want to maximize the value of your business for sale, one of the things that buyers are going to look at are what happens if you get hit by the proverbial bus. And if if you are so critical to the day to day of that business, when you go to sell it, the value isn't going to be as great. The value would be much greater with a strong team around you. And so that's why I advise like folks that are in that position, founders that are in that position, succession planning, and have a good number 2, 3, 4, 5 person, so that there's confidence, there's trust, right?
Yes.
And that's what will give you the best shot at a higher value for your sales. So again, also for me, a lot of the monetary side of this stuff, the monetary success is a byproduct of bringing in the right team too. And so the other nice thing about it is when you do have that team up and running strong, it's really nice to see everybody grow. And it's that qualitative satisfaction that you get out of it that is it really adds to just a much more pleasant work experience, and it makes the growing pains worth it.
Oh, 100%. And it's funny because I've always heard, and this is just from the outside, not being anywhere around the kind of the M&A field, that, there's a difference between, you think you have a business, but really you just own a job, right? If everything is so critical on you that you try to take a vacation, and by, a day and a half into it, the dumpster fires are so bad you have to go back, versus And it's totally dependent on you versus, hey, I can leave for 2 weeks on vacation, phone call here and there, but the business is doing just as good or better when I'm gone than when I'm there. It's a difference between I own a job, self-employed, or I actually own a business. And right, the value of I can walk away for 2 weeks and the business continues to maintain and grow, or I can sell and it continues to maintain it without me. I don't have to be the one. It's not all tied to the founder versus the one that is tied to the founder. They still may want to buy the business, but like I said, nowhere near the market value. And then the founders has to stay on for X number of time to try to train somebody else to get to that point. Absolutely not the same amount of value. But yeah, once again, the founder ends up being the bottleneck because and they don't enjoy it as much. I mean, who would want to? I could never go on vacation because if I walk away, we're not making money. Versus I've assembled a great team around me, and we're doing fine whether I'm here or not. Sometimes it's even better when, hey, we can get a lot more done when the boss isn't here.
Exactly. And part of it too, part of the limitations too, doesn't mean that you don't like to do certain things or so to stroke people's egos doesn't mean that you're bad at everything, right? But you have to realize your time limitations too. You have 24 hours in a day. I try to get, actually it's very detailed. I try to get 7 hours and 15 minutes of sleep a night. That's my magic number. For other people's, I try to wake up pretty early. I'm much more productive in the morning, and I have a law of diminishing returns at night. It's that way. So that's the self-awareness, but that's also knowing your limitations too. It doesn't mean that you're not capable. It just, you're limited by time, which, look, you got to find the right people to help you out with that. And so I think that's the other part too, is of the self-awareness. It's not that you're not capable of doing certain things. It's what can you reasonably get accomplished in a set time period.
Correct. Well, and I'll give one analogy. I don't know how good it'll be, but I'll give one analogy, and then we'll close out the segment. I mean, if you have on two ends of the spectrum, if you have a high people person, get out there, business development, press the flesh, shake hands, kiss babies kind of guy, and you're like, hey, I need you to do some really hardcore detailed work on these spreadsheets, and get in there and crunch the numbers and give me some analysis. Could they do it? Yes. Could they do it quickly and easily? Probably not. It may take them 2 or 3, 4 times longer than it would be someone who just absolutely loves the quantitative analysis end of it. And so it's a matter of time. Like I said, I could take 4 hours to do it, or this guy could do it in 30 minutes. What's the best use of my time? And even flip side of the coin, somebody who just loves with the numbers, and now all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, we need to go out and develop business and go out there and play the part of the people person. Can they? Yes. I've seen a lot of people do it successfully. Maybe take a lot longer. Is it a little bit more draining on it? Is it something that they're really, passionate about? Maybe not. But like I said, but I like that time thing, where, hey, who's best to do this and can do it? I enjoy it and I can get it done a lot quicker versus, yes, I can do it, but it just takes me so much longer to do because that's not my thing.
Yeah. What I know one other quick thought I wanted to get in here too, just because there are so many challenges, and I think it's important. We're talking about having to build a team, right? So I think the other big challenge of being a leader is asking and interviewing the right candidates.
Yes.
To build that team. And I have shifted. That's something that I've hopefully gotten better at, or I'm trying to, meaning, one of the key things that I'm really looking for is all the people that, we're interviewing are going to be technically talented.
Right.
But it is the other things that make a huge, huge impact, like emotional maturity and emotional intelligence. They're
Yes.
not just other buzzwords in business psychology. I mean, it's really important, and I think the higher the emotional intelligence, higher the emotional maturity, the better chance that person can do some critical thinking. And And technology, while as wonderful as it is, and I am so thankful for it, with the productivity gains, it has made many of us quite intellectually lazy. And I think that's probably, in my opinion, one of the biggest skill gaps out there today is the ability to critically think and challenge. So
I would I would agree with that 100%. So I would love to pick up the conversation on a little bit more about the emotional intelligence part of it as we pick up our last two questions in our final segment. But I think with that, let's go ahead and close out this segment of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave, featuring Chad Zoretic, and we will be back after this.
great.
Welcome back to Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. We are here in our final segment with Chad Zoretic. And Chad, we're going to jump straight into our next question. What do you see as one of the biggest mistakes leaders make today?
Well, I think we might have actually touched on some of it.
We did a little bit, yes,
Yeah,
but
yeah. I'm sure. Look, I am not short on words, so I think I can add to it. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make is trying to do it all themselves. I think that's probably pretty far up there, if not on the top of the list. You can't do everything, nor do you have time to do everything. I think another mistake that leaders make is potentially keeping too many things a secret, not letting enough people into the fold or into the loop. Again, though, like everything has to have some sort of level of reasonability applied to it. But I do think if you share a little bit more as a leader, people trust you a little bit more, and it is like, what can you do to foster a more trusting environment? And so so I think that goes a long way. I think another thing that I would say that is being too focused from an inward perspective. So not really, like I guess I would say, lack of empathy or lack of awareness on how others are perceiving you. You may know what's best as a leader. You may know what's best.
Yeah.
But I think in a lot of places I've seen, if it's a my way or the highway type of environment, it's pretty off-putting to some of, or maybe all of, the next level or next generation of leaders at your organization. And so we kind of talked about the concept of building a good team around you and having some succession planning. But I think if you're too inward focused, it's detrimental. And so to change that mindset into more of an outward collaborative focus, I think goes a long way. I think as a leader too, I think finding people that you can trust is really important. And also, I think as a leader too, you have a lot of pressure on you. People are relying on you. You sometimes feel like the weight of the world on your shoulders, right? And I got to keep all my busy people, or all my people busy, and I've got to hit these revenue numbers. I've got to do more with less. So I think the other thing that I see leaders struggle with sometimes is allowing themselves enough support to have really good mental health at the end of the day. And I'm not talking about I'm talking about are you happy? Are you with handling the stress and just having to I know that I can struggle with this at times too. Sometimes you feel like at work, dealing with all your clients or your customers, you use up all your patience, and you get home and you have too short of a fuse on the people that don't deserve that. I mean, no one really deserves it, but
Right.
and so I think having the proper outlets, right, to just keep, pressure valves to decompress and do stuff that you actually like too with the people that you love. And that's really important too. And sometimes we get pretty, narrow-minded and tunnel vision on a business goal, and not enough time taking good care of ourselves and our mental space.
I would agree with that. It's funny. I've heard people talk about this before, where they almost feel guilty to go play around the golf, or almost feel guilty to go out, to dinner and a movie or something, and they just feel bad that, oh, I'm wasting this time because I've got this deadline or this goal or this whatever, not realizing it kind of falls into the Covey's, seventh habit, kind of the sharpen the saw a little bit, either some development on yourself, or at least, if you push too much, you end up breaking. You've got to get some time to kind of rest and recoup so you can be the best when you get back to hitting it. Because if not, like I said, you'll end up, I mean, you're not good to anybody if you burn yourself out.
Yeah, the other thing I did actually probably about like about, it wasn't that long ago, about 5 years ago. I used to wear it as like a badge of honor how little I could get away with from a sleep perspective. I was like, I only need 4 hours, blah blah blah, and those days are gone. I mean, I really do try to get that 7 hours and 15 minutes. I go to, I just don't, I literally, there's a law of diminishing returns for me, especially with late night hours. I find that I am so much more productive getting a decent sleep and waking up early in the morning, fresh, energized. And I rarely need an alarm clock. I mean, rarely. And I mean,
Yeah.
well, I have dogs that take care of that, meaning they have to go
Same.
out. But even without them, I'm ready to go in the morning. So, but I think, getting proper sleep and eating well and all that does, factor into it.
I laugh. You talk about a badge of honor, and I know some people are not going to pick up the reference, but being born the same year, I know. Yeah, I know we'll both pick it up. It's kind of like name that tune. It's like, I can get away with 8 hours. Well, I can get away with 7 hours. I can get away with 4.5 hours. All right, name that tune.
Yep. Yep.
So bidding on how few hours of sleep you can get and still function.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, fortunately, we should get some hours back from the technology gains, right?
Hopefully that's the plan, is hopefully get a little bit of that, and a little bit of automation, a little bit of delegation, and all that stuff goes a long way. But yeah, it's funny you were talking about um, the trust part of it, and getting people around you that you trust, being transparent to the degree that you can, and building that sense of trust in the team. It's funny how most people don't realize that once you've exhausted and overdrafted that trust bank account, and you're not getting it back, or it's very difficult, because
Hmm.
when people lose trust in a leader, no matter kind of where you're at in the organization, and they feel like they've been taken advantage of, or you just, hey, he lied to me, or even if it's out of their control, unless it's handled correctly, it's really tough to get that trust back. And once it's gone, you see a lot of the other things, efficiencies, productivities, engagement, so much just falls off the cliff after that trust factor has been
Yeah.
violated.
Yeah. And I think also, one other mistake, I mean, it's kind of probably blended into some of the stuff we already spoke about, but that a leader can make is not listening enough. I think I'm trying to be I think that's where I have the most growth, and I need to grow more, is in the power of listening. Listen to your people, listen to your customers, listen, and you'll learn a lot. And you learn a lot more by listening. And I learned that later on in my career. Probably a little too late, maybe.
Well, it's some of the things, I think all of us have discovered a few things later than we have liked. We're like, dang, that'd have been nice to know about 30 years ago. At least 20. But I like one thing that you were talking about that made reminded me kind of a story or thing I'd heard from Marshall Goldsmith before. You were talking about the leader felt like he, knew what was best. And I remember watching a video and Marshall Goldsmith talking about the leader bringing too much value or providing too much value. And I was like, I mean, that's all you hear all the time is, providing value. Like, how do you provide too much value? I don't get it. Well, when he finished up the kind of the example, he mentioned about one of the people that work for you bring you an idea. She brings you an idea and she's all excited about it and just jazzed and this is fantastic and whatever. And great idea. And maybe you could put your 2 cents worth into it and maybe increase it by percent, make it 5% better. Well, you might want to think about this, and that and do it. But then when you start telling her how to, or him how to, how to do it and what to change and whatever, now all of a sudden it's not their plan, it's your plan. And then their motivation to do your plan versus their motivation to do their plan just plummets. And so, yeah, you might end up, making the plan actually, or the idea actually better by 5%, but you probably decrease their motivation by half to actually go out and enthusiastically implement it. And I was like, okay.
Absolutely, and that kind of is also dovetails off of the comment where, like, I think a good leader takes none of the credit and all the blame
Yeah.
a lot of the time. But that toward that, like, you don't want to demotivate your people, especially when they're bringing great ideas to the table. You energize it, you give them all the credit for that idea, and you just help them launch that. And launch it maybe a little bit better or whatever. But I absolutely agree with that concept.
And the funny thing about it, and this is at least what I've picked up from kind of reading between the lines, is I think Marshall Goldsmith, was talking about it's not that the leader was intending to, blow away all their motivation. They thought they were doing a good thing, not realizing that that little bit of incremental, maybe increase in, hey, this makes it better, does so much damage to the motivation on the other end. Like I said, well-meaning, well-intended, but doesn't realize the damage that ends up being done. Like, well, wait a minute, why didn't I thought they were going to do X, Y, and Z? Well, you just pretty much took all the air out of their sails, and why would they now? So, like I said, best intentions, but poor execution if you're not aware of what some of the things can do to the other people that work for you.
Yeah, and that is part of the empathy side of things, meaning put yourself in that person's shoes, and maybe it's just the way that the suggestion is framed, and it
Yeah,
can have a totally different outcome. And maybe it
100%.
is you pose a question to that person so that it really is their idea, right? And
Yep.
and so, and I am fascinated by that. And look, I like learning every day. I like learning something new every day. So
100%. Well, let's hit on the last question. Speaking about that, talk about learning. This is a perfect segue to the last question. What do you think is the best way for leaders to improve their leadership skills?
oh boy. So I think we all kind of touched on a few of them, but I think a combination of one, get feedback,
Okay.
get feedback, get 360 feedback, get feedback from external customers, get feedback from your staff, get feedback from peers in the industry, get feedback with some of your peers that you may collaborate with on the outside, get feedback. And one of the things that I like about being a partner at Armanino is we get a lot of great feedback, and
Oh,
we're
nice.
constantly getting feedback, and it really helps me out. And it also, a lot of quote unquote mistakes are not intentional. Uh, it just might be that I'm running a little too fast and I didn't notice something, and my
Yeah.
self awareness was off. I'm definitely not perfect. So, I think getting feedback is really important. I think having a good sounding board is also really important. We all are in tough situations, and I think that's another benefit of working at a great firm like Armanino. I've got so many other partners that I can reach out to and really share, you know, pretty tough stuff. And hey, have you been in this situation before, right? And
Nice.
and what happened? Like,
And
how did
that's
it work
hard to
out
do
for
when
you?
that's hard to do when you're solo or you got a
It
small
is.
partnership. You're the
It
head
is.
person.
But that's also the power of networking too. Like if you're alone, you're only alone because you want to be alone. You don't have to be alone. And I think that was also that transition from being sole proprietor, working for myself and kind of eating what I kill type of thing and all that.
Right.
Well, it's still that gets pretty lonely. So, reaching on the outside and having get connected in the community, whether it's your geographic community, your business community. Look, the upside, COVID did have some upside. I mean, there are so many online outlets and virtual outlets that have really connected the masses, and you can find people that you can really network with. And look, I mean, I like learning and I like being taught too. So I'm completely not against the concept of executive coaching or a combination of executive coaching and half therapist too. I mean, like at the end of the day. So I think there's a lot of different outlets, and if you feel alone, please don't. You shouldn't. Like you should. And that it breaks my heart when people really feel alone
Yeah.
because you're not.
Well, it's funny you mentioned about networks because that's one of the things that when I went into business, I really kind of jumped headlong into the deep end of the pool as far as our local chamber and really tried to, network and meet as many people as I can. And then, like you said, you do find, 5 or 6 people that are kind of in a, even if they're not in the same industry, they're in a similar situation that you are. And it is nice to be able to bounce ideas off of other people and have that kind of informal network versus the just be able to send something to a colleague over Teams and say, hey, have you had to deal with this before? So, but yes, if you get out there and work it, you can build a nice network and have those people to be able to kind of lean on a little bit when you need that outlet or at least a sounding board.
Yeah, and the other thing too that I enjoy is it's kind of like you learn on the concept of you learn more from your mistakes than from your victories.
Yeah.
I also like, I mean, while I like networking with people that are in the same, maybe in the same space as me or in the same profession or whatever, I also like networking with people that are have nothing to do with what I do. I mean, and a complete, like they may be, I don't know, a conductor of a symphony, like
Yeah.
what, but just totally different. And it's really neat to hear different perspectives on things. I may not lead with, "Hey, have you ever done a deal before?" or something like that. But just on a current event topic or something like that, it's really neat to get you know different perspectives than your own, and I think that's how we grow too.
Oh, I'd agree with that. And it's always nice just from that perspective to, have a little bit of conversational knowledge, be conversationally aware of enough things that you could at least get a conversation started. Like I said, whether it's news, current events, something in their particular industry, if you find out. But yeah, it's interesting to see and hear the perspective of people that aren't in your space and either on something that you're doing because like I said maybe they look at what you do completely different than what you do because they have no idea
Right,
either in of it or sometimes perfectly great things end up having a bad rap because people don't know all the stuff behind the scenes.
right.
So it's nice to get that variety of viewpoints and opinions and like I said just sometimes talk to somebody who has learned about something that has nothing to do with what you do every day.
Well, it's a good break too. So,
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's fascinating sometimes to hear about um, what people have done to get where they are in their industry. That's like, wow, I never would have thought you had to do X to do
right.
that. It's pretty fascinating, actually. So I think that goes back to a good, like you said, the empathy, the kind of you actually care, have a care for people and want to understand people and kind of meet them where they're at. I think that goes a long way. But it's dealing with people that particularly answer to you, like you said, from an empathy perspective, or just put yourself in anybody else's shoes, regardless of where they're at. I think that plays a role either in the workplace or just out in general. Like I said, being a good communicator, being able to relate to other folks, and God forbid, a little bit of empathy goes a long way.
Correct. I actually, as we were talking too, and I'm kind of maybe bouncing around a little bit on this too, but it just dawned on me too. One of the other things that I know I've struggled with in the past, and it's difficult for me, is to say no. That is it's tough for me. But if you overextend yourself, or if you don't set up the appropriate boundaries, even with your customers too, you'll get eaten alive, and
Yeah.
you're no good. Like, you're not going to be good to anybody. And
No,
so,
you're right. Whether you call it scope creep or whether it's just saying yes to everybody, if you do that enough, like I said, you're spread so thin. When you can't get your own stuff done, you're right. You can't take care of yourself as far as your own renewing or recharging to get back into it. But yeah, I think that definitely falls into the one of the biggest mistakes leaders make is depending on the temperament. Some folks, and I guilty as charged, sometimes it's really hard to say no when you want to jump in and you want to be helpful, but sometimes the best thing you can say is, sorry, I can't right now.
right, exactly.
So cool. Well, Chad, tell listeners how they can connect with you, connect with your company, connect with you on LinkedIn. How can they kind of somehow, connect into all the goodness of Chad?
Well, so a couple ways. I'm happy to connect through LinkedIn. It's great. That's a great community. So I'm fairly active on there. My email, my work email is my first name dot last name. So once you master spelling my last name, it's chad.zoretic at armanino.com. Actually, you got to master my last name and the firm name. So
I would
um,
say the firm name's tougher to master than your last name. I'm not gonna lie,
so,
just being
so,
honest.
well, Zoretic rhymes with phonetic, so that it makes it a little bit easier. So feel free to either connect with me via email or LinkedIn. Also, our website for the firm is www.armanino.com. And there's also a directory of the partners on there, and with our related expertise too. So happy to connect through our work.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thanks for being on today, Chad. And hopefully, I say encourage everybody to connect with you on LinkedIn. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of Conversations on Leadership with Dr. Dave. But we will see you all next time. Take care.
Great. Thank you.